And through this method, Epstein's sphere of influence grew so great that he was able to get off with a slap on the wrist for committing some of the world's most heinous crimes. He was Kaiser Soze, protected from up on high by the Prince of Darkness. And if that kind of power can be gained by blackmailing powerful pedophiles, then we have a much larger problem with powerful pedophiles than any of us ever imagined.
Never tell them who I am. Well, how dang, I'm a man. 6 shooters in both my hands. I'm a cold-blooded brother, a real bad mother. Watch out, honey, here I am.
Welcome back, and god damn it am I revved up. Yes, I know, I dropped off the face of the planet for a couple weeks here, but after the Chinese virus turned everything I was working on into an irrelevant effort, becoming yet another premature voice whipping around like an Alabama trailer home in a tornado of disinformation was a prospect I just took no liking to. But now that a significant amount of information has come out, and enough has unfolded to get a decently clear look at the situation, I'm finally ready to open my mouth, and I got shit to say and questions to ask. Let's start with the most definitive statement of the day. Fuck China. President Trump has been warning us about China for a while now, pussyfooting around with tariffs and trade deals, but it's high time he channels his inner South Park counterpart and proceed accordingly.
And now, let's begin. Fucking them all to death!
You're damn right. Now before I get going, let me be emphatically clear. This diatribe is not aimed at Chinese people or people of Chinese descent. We've been seeing a lot of reports of increased assaults against Asian Americans, and that shit needs to stop. If anything, we need to look at the Chinese people with empathy and realize they are even greater victims of the evil Chi-Com regime than we are. But as for the Chinese government, those slippery commie fucks could have quashed this kung flu with a single spray from a disinfecting bottle of honesty. But no. Instead of warning the international community about a looming pandemic before it could break contain, they lied to save face. They lied to ensure that if a pandemic sank their economy and weakened their position on the world stage, we'd all be hostages on their own sinking ship. This was a pure power play. It's time we face the facts. The Chinese government is an abhorrently unscrupulous band of miscreants hell-bent on world domination, and opening them up was akin to opening up Pandora's box. Over the last 70 years, this evil commie slave state has been playing the long game, and they'd just as soon send the entire world into an end-of-days freefall than lose any ground they've gained on the world stage. Well, I say it's time we remind them that just as we open China up, we can close that motherfucker down, North Korea style, back to the fucking Dark Ages. Let's look at everything China did to wreak death and destruction on the world at large, then you tell me they don't deserve to be eradicated into the dustbins of human history. They knew about this disease as far back as November. Think about that. Think about you and your family, gathered around the dinner table to enjoy Thanksgiving dinner, undoubtedly arguing and bickering, but gleefully unaware that you were mere months away from a global pandemic and an economic collapse the likes the world has never seen. It seems like forever ago, but at that same blip on our shared timeline, the Chinese government was already aware of this looming threat to you and yours, and what do? Did they warn foreign governments about an outbreak? Did they give us all the information they had on this new coronavirus? Did they do anything to contain the spread of the virus within their own borders? Fuck no, they didn't. They silenced and likely murdered any benevolent whistleblowers whose true intentions were to save as many lives as possible. China knew that this was going to wreck them, and they'd be damned if they were the only ones to go down. So what do? They kept it out of the public consciousness and let it lay waste to their own citizens to buy them enough time to slurp up foreign medical supplies from the very countries they knew they'd be infecting. From the Washington Examiner. A Chinese government-backed real estate company told employees operating out of the foreign countries to put their day-to-day work on the back burner to source medical supplies to ship back to China when the coronavirus began spreading. But China's lies were not simply of omission. According to the National Post, No one will ever know how many additional deaths resulted from the determination of China's leadership to protect itself at the expense of others. These are European lives, Asian lives, Black lives, Hispanic lives, American lives. These are the lives of you and your friends, your family, your loved ones. Whether it was all out of self-interest, or pure malice, or a combination of both, this was an act of war, and even a pacifist like the dude knows.
This will not stand, you know? This aggression will not stand, man.
No, it fucking won't. The article goes on. They may face a challenge in that China's credibility, which was never great, has been shredded to a degree even its inventive propagandists may find difficult to overcome. Initially praised for its response to the outbreak, we now know Beijing did its best to hide and then play down the danger, arrest and punish those who tried to issue warnings, and glorify media outlets that obediently parroted the government line and expelled foreign journalists who couldn't be frightened or controlled. Mere mention of the fact that the virus originated in Wuhan has been deemed racist and insulting, while officials plant conspiracy theories suggesting a dark plot by the US military. I think it's become abundantly clear that North Korea is nothing more than the mini-me to China's Dr. Evil.
Cindy the Clown!
He is exactly like you in every way. Except 1/8 your size.
Breathtaking. I shall call him Mini-Me.
In fact, not only do I propose evacuating our manufacturing and placing equivalent sanctions on China that we do North Korea, I think it's high time we reevaluate their ranking on the hierarchy of historically evil empires and elevate them to the top fucking spot. Yes, even above the dreaded Nazis. I know this may come as a shock to many of you because we've so deservedly fossilized the Nazis as the paramount force of human evil, but what did the Nazis do that China hasn't? China enslaves religious and ethnic groups they deem inferior, with over 1 million Muslim Uyghurs interned in concentration camps. Their stated goal since Mao's revolution has been utter world domination. They run organ harvesting farms, so they have their own Mengele unit. And they impose hardline authoritative measures against any political dissidents. So why should they be elevated above the Nazis? It's all about the body count. With 60 million dead during Mao's revolution alone, the Chi-Coms have put enough bodies in the ground to make the Nazis look like a B-team in the genocidal Ladies League. But let's not be mistaken. We have our own band of miscreant psychopaths, and it's about time we start holding our elected representatives and business leaders accountable for selling out our nation to a communist slave state in the first place. Cold War or not, trying to create a regional adversary by propping up another communist regime with even less Western sympathies than the Soviets was quite possibly the biggest blunder in foreign policy our nation has ever seen. Keep in mind, when we opened up China, we had just returned from fighting the Vietnam War, fought in part to stop Chinese expansion. RDJ, tell them what they did.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
You're damn right they went full retard. All our politicians did was kick the grenade down the road, and here it is, landing at our feet with a thunderous... You guys alright? This is not a left versus right issue. We all saw the potential for that sweet, sweet dollar and those cheaply made Chinese goods, and we all had to adjust our pants as we went from 6 to midnight. But that shit needs to end. Not only can we no longer justify doing business with a communist slave state, to do so would be a degradation of the very principles this nation was founded upon. I just hope we aren't so far dependent on them at this point that we couldn't survive without them. Of course, we have a wide swath of our patriotic media that would rather be them, which brings me to my next topic of conversation. We've known since 2016 that our media are a bunch of partisan hacks that want desperately to take down President Trump. But at this point, we have to conclude that the media are far more like bloodthirsty hellhounds fueled by a degree of hatred unfathomable to the rational mind. Throughout this entire pandemic, the media has let the personal well-being of American citizens take a back seat to their war on our president. While Donald Trump was forming his Kung Flu fighting task force, Democrats and the media were wholly consumed with impeaching the man for wanting to root out corruption in the deep state. And by the way, forget Ukraine. I want to know about that $1.5 billion that Hunter Biden walked out of China or flew out of China with on Air Force Two. Let's look into that. But even facing the sham impeachment hearings, Donald Trump was working to put together a task force for what appeared to be a looming pandemic. And the media was there to tell everyone coronavirus was no big deal. President Trump called for shutting down travel to and from China, and the media was there to call him xenophobic. And for all intents and purposes, we're going to be referring to Democrats and the media interchangeably here because they're all stormtroopers of the same cabal. When President Trump spoke of hope, the media was there to push panic. All the while, they criticized Trump for not acting swiftly enough during the same period of time that they were busy telling us the Wu flu was no big deal and circle jerking over the losing prospect that they might finally convince the public that the Orange Man is indeed bad. Trump and I thank you for the ratings boost. But never to be outdone by their own previous outbursts of Trump derangement syndrome, the same mainstream media that spent weeks referring to coronavirus as Chinese suddenly dug heel and pivoted the moment the Chinese government called it racist, never missing a chance to seize on an opportunity to call Trump a bigot. They went on to parrot Chinese claims and statistics because when it comes to banding together as a nation under Trump or furthering their mouth-foaming mission to destroy the man at all costs, the choice to side with a virulent communist dictator known for slave camps and political executions was a no-brainer. And by that, I mean if they had any brain at all, they'd acknowledge that the whole anti-Trump hysteria thing has become an industry-wide suicide mission, and they'd adjust their sails accordingly. But they don't, and they won't. As if 3+ years of Russian collusion and Ukrainian investigations were not enough, both the Democrats and the media continue to sink their teeth in. Despite the fact that trust in the media is at an all-time low, and Democrat investigations have proven to do nothing but raise Trump's profile and provide his campaign with a veritable cash cow, it's starting to look like this isn't even about the election at all. The Democrats have no one to run against Trump this year, and they know it. So if 2020 is a lost cause, then why continue running from the same playbook that continues to devastate their interests? Just last week, Adam Schiff announced that he and Nancy Pelosi are opening yet another investigation into Trump over his handling of the coronavirus. In an even bigger move of insanity, an Ohio state rep is calling for Trump to be indicted on crimes against humanity for touting hydroxychloroquine, a known and approved drug that's shown nothing but efficacy in fighting the Wu flu. It's almost as if the media and Democrats want this pandemic to hurt people as much as humanly possible. And when I say almost, I mean exactly. It's exactly like that. In such a time of crisis, it takes an agenda so misaligned with the American people that they would continue to spur divisions and jeopardize the health and well-being of our citizens just to continue peddling the same tired orange man bad narrative. If one thing has become increasingly clear, it's that these people are not political actors. They are cornered, feral animals. For the longest time, we have taken the media and Democrats' outrage at face value, believing that the media simply detests Trump for supposed character flaws. He's too brash. He's too bold. He needs to stop with the tweets. But as they continue to go so far beyond the threshold of rationality, we simply cannot afford to keep viewing it through such a simplistic lens. The math simply doesn't add up. Throughout the course of American history, the party holding the presidency has always vacillated from Republican to Democrat to Republican, and on it went. That a Republican would follow 8 years of Obama is simply par for the course. So why the absolutely insane, vitriolic effort to take Trump out? What has he done to draw such ire? He was basically a New York Democrat his whole life, and his policy proposals are ones that Democrats have backed within the last dozen or so years themselves. So I don't buy that it's just because he's brash and coarse with his language anymore. Americans love that shit anyways. Now, there are some of the more slack-jawed among us that it could be cause for criticism, I get that. But it is not cause for the media to incessantly peddle wholly intentional lies to the American public day after day after day. It is not cause for a non-stop assault of investigations that anyone with a shred of intellectual honesty would describe as extremely dubious at best. It's not cause for violent street gangs like Antifa to take over cities in an attempt to scare political dissidents into submission. On the surface, it's about disdain for a duly elected president. But this is all simply too far beyond the pale. There is something else going on here. Something more than bad sportsmanship over a lost presidential campaign. Something else was at stake, and it's time we start asking some serious questions. First, what threat does Donald Trump truly pose, and to whom does he pose this threat to? I think it all goes back to Trump's campaign promise to drain the swamp. It is abundantly clear that when Hillary lost in 2016, the establishment, the Democrats, the media, Hollywood, the deep state, they lost far more than just the presidential run. Could the swamp be much deeper and murkier than we ever imagined? Could drain the swamp be much more than an empty campaign catchphrase? After the re-indictment of Jeffrey Epstein, I couldn't help but notice that Trump has quietly been a titan in battling the scourge of human trafficking. We could start with two of his executive orders. The first, Executive Order number 13818, which Trump signed in December of 2017, and that's the executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuses or corruption. Then, this January, Trump signed Executive Order 13903, Executive Order in combating human trafficking and online child exploitation in the United States. Okay, so he signed a couple of executive orders. But what does that mean on the ground? All we have to do is look at the statistics for human trafficking arrests over the last two administrations. In 2018 alone, the Trump administration arrested more human traffickers than all 8 years of the Obama administration combined. To say that human trafficking has been a focus of Trump and his administration would qualify as an understatement of the year. We only have to look at a couple stats in a USA Today article titled 13 Sex Trafficking Statistics That Explain the Enormity of the Global Sex Trade to see that we have a major issue on our hands. The first being that 1 in 7 reported runaways in the US is likely the victim of child sex trafficking. Now, a quick Google search will show you that around 800,000 children are reported missing in the US each year. The other important stat from the USA Today article being that profits from forced sexual labor are estimated at $99 billion worldwide. Most of the human trafficking into America is run by cartels and operate along our southern border. And as Trump fought like hell for protections at our border, railing against human traffickers and drug traffickers alike, Democrats and their corporate media propaganda arm decried him as a racist, bigot, xenophobe, and the literal reincarnation of Adolf Hitler himself. While we'll never know just how many women and children Donald Trump has rescued from sex slavery, it's crystal clear that the Democrats and the corporate media couldn't give a damn. So what does this have to do with Democrats and the media's rabid fervor to destroy Trump? Unfortunately, I'm slowly starting to believe that it might have much more to do with it than any of us actually want to believe. Now, for years, I've always considered Hillary Clinton to be something of a kingpin to a corrupt neoliberal influence cartel that includes Democrats, the mainstream media, Hollywood, academia, big tech. We've known that she is putrid with corruption, but the response to her losing in 2016 is absolutely unprecedented. So I want to know, what the fuck did Hillary have planned, and what is the extent of her corruption in the State Department? During the run-up to the election, President Trump spoke in no uncertain terms about what Hillary Clinton was up to as Secretary of State.
The other candidate in this race has spent her entire life making money for special interests, and I will tell you, she's made plenty of money for them, and she's been taking plenty of money out for herself. Hillary Clinton has perfected the politics of personal profit and even theft. She ran the State Department like her own personal hedge fund, doing favors for oppressive regimes, and many others, and really many, many others, in exchange for cash. Pure and simple, folks. Pure and simple.
And let's also not forget about what a former assistant FBI director had to say regarding the Clintons. A former FBI official said Sunday that Bill and Hillary Clinton are part of a crime family, and argued that top officials hindered the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server while she was Secretary of State. Now, I'm not here to speculate or draw any conclusions, but we should all be asking what this is really about and what kind of future we might have been facing had Hillary Clinton won the presidency, as well as what really goes on at the Clinton Foundation. What schemes did our ever-presiding political succubus hatch while she was Secretary of State that she would have been able to fully implement with the office of the presidency? And this is where we return to human trafficking. I find it no coincidence that high-profile sex traffickers like Keith Raniere and his Hollywood-connected NXIVM sex cult came to light under a Donald Trump presidency. I also find it no coincidence that the infamous Jeffrey Epstein had his case reopened against him once Trump took office. And as we all know, Jeffrey Epstein was no stranger to the Clintons. But had Epstein not been suicided and actually talked, I can almost guarantee you that he would have proven to have been a keystone at the center of a massive web of corruption, blackmail, and human trafficking that likely has greater reach into our global elitist community than any of us want to believe. Think about who Epstein was. A college dropout who mysteriously accrued almost $1 billion in a Rolodex full of global elites running a pedophile blackmail scheme. It's a picture that paints itself. He was a pimp of underage girls to the world's rich and powerful. Pedophilia is one of the worst things a person can engage in. If you're busted for being a pedophile, your life is over. There's a reason that even in prison, pedophiles often find themselves fitted with a shiv, and there's a reason that no one gives a shit when it happens. If you have blackmail on somebody with an underage child, you own them. They are yours for life. And through this method, Epstein's sphere of influence grew so great that he was able to get off with a slap on the wrist for committing some of the world's most heinous crimes. He was Kaiser Soze, protected from up on high by the Prince of Darkness. And if that kind of power can be gained by blackmailing powerful pedophiles, then we have a much larger problem with powerful pedophiles than any of us ever imagined. And this is where we return to the Clinton of it all. Everyone knows that Epstein was close with the Clintons. Bill flew on Epstein's Lolita Express 26 times that we know of and visited Epstein's pedophile island. We've all seen the painting of Bill Clinton in Monica Lewinsky's famous blue dress that was recovered on Epstein's island. Now, I do not know precisely what role in human trafficking the Clintons have played or what their ends are outside of money, power, and influence. I'm not here to speculate. The Trump administration has been keeping a pretty tight lid on John Durham and Bill Barr's investigation into corruption, but I will not be in the least bit surprised when the investigation details heavy involvement from the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation in money laundering, corruption, and human trafficking. General Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, recently gave a speech at Hillsdale College where she discussed some of the findings regarding Anthony Weiner's laptop. Keep in mind that Weiner is the husband of Huma Abedin, Hillary's top aide and right-hand woman.
So one of the things, if I were the president, I'd do is demand the Anthony Weiner laptop and get it to the most trusted person in the military to take apart everything on it and then start using it. There's a lot that can be prosecuted, I have no doubt, on that laptop. In fact, I heard that the New York police officers who saw some of it, even though they're hardened investigators, literally had to go throw up. It's bad.
So we know about the Clintons' connection to Epstein and his blackmail, pedophilia, and human trafficking cartel. We know about John of God, Bill Clinton's Brazilian faith healer, who is now serving what amounts to a life sentence for serial raping a number of women and is credibly accused of running a child sex slave farm. From the New York Post, Bittencourt claims that Faria, which is John of God's real name, would offer money to poor girls aged 14 to 18 to go live in mineral mines or farms that he owns in the Brazilian states of Goiás and Minas Gerais. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce Brazilian states, so I could be butchering those. There, they would become sex slaves and be forced to get pregnant, and their babies would be sold to the highest bidder from other continents, Bittencourt alleges. In exchange for food, they were impregnated and their babies sold on the black market, she said. Hundreds of girls were enslaved over years, lived on farms in Goiás, served as wombs to get pregnant for their babies to be sold. These girls were murdered after 10 years of giving birth. And that was Bill Clinton's faith healer. We also know about Laura Silsby, how she was arrested trying to traffic 33 children out of earthquake-ravaged Haiti. And we know how her good friend, Bill Clinton, was there to bail her out of trouble, getting her a drastically reduced charge and sentence. At this point, we simply know too much to write off their involvement in human trafficking as a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's just pure coincidence that they accidentally find themselves connected to so many human traffickers. But it must be investigated thoroughly. It's no longer about conspiracy theories. At this point, it's about due diligence and sound police work.
This isn't happening. Everyone look away, please. Nothing to see here.
But it's not just the Clintons. We know that pedophilia is a major issue in Hollywood, another power sector of our country's elites. We've heard from Corey Feldman and the late Corey Haim how they were passed around at Hollywood parties as kids and groomed by rampant sexual predators in the business. We've heard the accusations against people like Kevin Spacey and Bryan Singer. Now those two hit especially home for me because The Usual Suspects was the movie that inspired me to want to become a filmmaker in the first place. An article from Veterans Today talks about several cases of Hollywood pedophiles working in the business. One of those child managers was Bob Villard, who was convicted of child pornography back in 1987. Villard claimed that he worked with former young actors like Tobey Maguire, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Danny Nucci. Jason Michael Handy, who calls himself a pedophile full-blown, and who worked as a production assistant at Nickelodeon, was eventually sentenced to 6 years in prison for sexually exploiting 6-year-olds. Martin Weiss, a longtime talent manager who specialized in representing young actors, was again sentenced to years in prison for sexually abusing boys. Many others could be named here. On a mainstream cultural level, we see pedophilia being normalized in our culture every day. We see Drag Queen Story Hour exposing little kids to transgender ideology and overt sexual imagery. We see child drag queens dancing for money at gay bars like little strippers. We see pride parades where little children are exposed to all kinds of different adult fetishes. Sorry, this is a lot. We also see children as young as kindergarten being introduced to LGBTQ ideas and prepubescent kids taught how to perform anal sex. And this is in our public schools. Now keep in mind, I have not made any theories or drawn any conclusions about what this all adds up to, and all of my sources come from mainstream news outlets. But if you want to call me a conspiracy theorist for acknowledging that we have a massive top-down problem with human trafficking and pedophilia, you're simply trying to bully me into ignoring my own lying eyes, and that ain't gonna happen. It's the same top-down power structure, these same top-down power players that are so vehemently opposed to President Trump. So for all the insanity over the Trump presidency by Democrats, the media, Hollywood, I do believe it is a reaction to Trump's promise to drain the swamp. And I do believe that Trump is doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make good on that promise, and it will cost a lot of bad people very dearly. Could it be that the swamp is much deeper and murkier than any of us ever imagined? Could it be that Trump's promise to drain the swamp is an existential threat to the snakes that slither within it? It's becoming increasingly clear that the answer to that question is yes. And I, for one, want to see that swamp drained bone dry. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm going to try to put out 1 or 2 of these videos a week, but I do work a full-time job, so if you're interested in seeing more frequent content, please consider contributing to my Subscribestar, Patreon, or PayPal accounts listed below, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thorburn. And as always, rev your engines, ride hard, and fight like hell.
Every time who I am, well, how dare I'm a man.